inside. So you'll have a double layer there, which is exactly the same as the inside of the card here. Okay, so this is for the front of the card. Discard my envelope for a second. So this is for the front of the card. Now it's slightly different to the one I've done here with the music notes. It's got a slightly different pattern on it, but it doesn't faze me, so I'm going to use that one. So I'm going to stamp the thank you in the bottom right corner. Now I'm going to use StazOn ink because we have an embossed texture to this card, and it would be, you may find the ink will rub off that. Now I wanted to, I have a StazOn black and I have a StazOn brown, so I'm going to be using the StazOn brown just because I prefer it, but you can use whatever you've got at home. So I'm going to use my Stampin-Up because I want to make sure that I get the sentiment on straight. If you want to know how to use the Stampin-Up, you can check out my YouTube channel. I have a video to show you how to use the Stampin-Up. So I'm not going to show you, but I'm going to do it. I'm going to get early espresso and get that ink onto this imaging sheet, because if I use StazOn ink, the sentiment will stay on my imaging sheet for good, unless I've got StazOn remover. So I'm just going to get the thank you on the imaging sheet. I'm going to get my bit of card, and on the bottom right I'm going to put the imaging sheet where I want the sentiment to be, and this time I'm going to use the StazOn because I actually want it to stay on the cardstock. I don't want it to move. Sorry, I think I just jogged that, so I'm just going to check that's in the right place. There, okay. I'm going to use my StazOn ink pad. Don't keep your StazOn uncovered for long because it will dry out. Okay, so we've got our thank you there. Now I don't need to clean my stamp, but it's going to look like it's got brown ink on it, so it's whether you're worried about that kind of thing. Now the reason I've done this first is because I've cut you a rectangular piece of very vanilla card, and that is what will go off at an angle. Now if I'd have cut that first, you may find that you wanted a longer sentiment or a bigger sentiment and it wouldn't fit. So what I've decided to do was to do your sentiment first, then you lay this on top. Now what I'm going to do before I decide is I'm going to get the little corner image. I'm going to use StazOn brown again because I want to get it into the corner. So I'm going to use early espresso to get it on my imaging sheet. So I'm going to put this into the corner of my Stampin-Up, this corner. Put it on my imaging sheet, and then going to line that up in the corner nice and neatly where I'd like it to be. Okay, gently lift that up, and now I'm going to use StazOn. The reason I'm using StazOn is because we're actually going to colour the flowers in using blender pens, and blender pens are they have fluid in them, so if you were to use the dye inks, it will make the ink in the stamp. If we were to use dye inks here, it will make the ink bleed when you use the blender pens, whereas the fact that I've done it in StazOn means that it won't. So what's going to happen is now I'm going to decide how jaunty an angle I want that to be. I'm going to ink the edges and I'm going to colour in the floral image. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to stick it down and I'm going to turn it over and trim off the excess. But I will actually glitter it before I stick it down. So I'm just going to talk you through how I did this. So you'll need crumb cake ink and you'll need a blender pen. Always with your blender pens, run the nib on your paper to make sure that, because it may look like there's some ink on the nib but there isn't, but just make sure. I'm just going to pick up a bit of crumb cake ink and I'm actually going to colour in my flower using the crumb cake ink. So it's very subtle. Okay, so you're just going to colour in the flowers until you're happy with them, as much or as little as you wish. You are actually going to make a glitter effect on the leaves, so it's up to you whether you colour them in or not. I used a blender pen because I wanted quite a subtle effect. You may want to go with a marker pen and just colour it in. The marker pen just comes out just a shade darker, so if you want to do a mixture of both, then you can, which is sort of what I'm doing here. And I just remembered, actually, I need to get the card from the inner piece, and I need to stamp that also, so that I can colour in the inside at the same time. So I'm just going to get just the edge piece. Like that. Tiny little detail, but just adds a little bit of interest when they open the card. So I have just coloured directly onto that, and now I'll try and blend it in. You can do whatever you wish. Okay. So there we go. Now I'm going to show you how we do the glitter. Okay, now I prefer to do the glitter before I stick it down. First of all, because if I make a mistake, I can just replace this rather than the whole piece. Second of all, I find that the glitter wants to get caught in all the crevices down the edge. And also, if you're going to ink the edges, now is the time to ink the edges. I will show you how I ink my edges. So actually, I won't show you, because we need to know what size and what it looks like before we ink the edges. So I won't do that till we've cut it. So now what we're going to do is we're going to get a bit of scratch paper, or just a bit of rough paper. So I've just got a bit of paper from my printer, which I've scored down the middle, which just makes a nice little easy file. I'm now going to get my heat and stick powder and my glitter and my Versamark pen. Now I've used a Versamark pen. If you don't own a Versamark pen, you could always use a paintbrush and a Versamark refill. Okay. Now for some reason my Versamark pen doesn't feel very inky, so I'm just going to add a bit of Versamark directly to the tip. It's just like using a paintbrush, really. So I'm going to, at this point, I'm going to use my Versamark ink, and I'm going to put it where I would like the glitter to be. So I'm going to do it on my leaves and in the centre of my flowers. Okay, so I'm going to do it a bit more on this bigger flower. I'm going to do it on all the bits I kind of haven't coloured in. Okay, now I don't know if you can see, but you can actually see where the ink is a little bit wet and shiny. Now I'm going to pour my heat and stick powder over. Now this basically is just like a powdered glue, so that when you sprinkle it over the Versamark, it will stick to the Versamark ink. And can you see where it's stuck onto? And I'm going to heat set that in a moment. So before I do that, I don't want to leave this glue sat in this paper, because if I heat set this by accident, I would just have a nice big large amount of glue, which is not good. The rest can go on the floor. So I've just got rid of my heat and stick powder, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the lid off my glitter. This is the Dazzling Diamonds glitter that Stampin' Up sell. I'm not a big glitter girl because I don't like it being everywhere, but this is quite a nice way when you use the heat and stick powder, because it sticks to the heat and stick powder and it shouldn't come off. Then I'm going to take my heat gun, and what everybody does is they turns the heat gun on and push it straight on their card. Just give it a moment or two to warm up. I'm just turning it on. It's not pointing at anything, it's not dangerously near anything. I'm just letting it get to temperature. And once I'm ready to use it, I'm going to turn it down, and you'll see where I've got the heat and stick powder, it will go shiny. It's melting it onto my card. Okay. And now quickly I'm going to turn it off, hold it over my glitter, and I'm going to sprinkle my glitter. And my glitter should only want to stick where my the heat and stick powder was, because it's made it melt. Now I'm going to very quickly just heat set that, and you'll sort of, it doesn't need much, I'm just going to go over it, and it just embeds it, nestles it into the heat and stick powder, and just means that it'll stay put. So that's it. So I'll put the lid back on the glitter because otherwise you know what will happen. Okay, and now what I need to do is decide what part of the card I want to keep and what part of the card I don't want to keep. So what I'll probably do is, if I lay it roughly about there, if I turn it over now, the way I would do it now is to mark with a pencil. You can stick it down and do it, it really doesn't matter. So I'm going to mark it with a pencil, and I'm going to cut that line. Simply I'm going to go and try and just go just inside that line on my trimmer. Okay, so there's my bit of card, which now means I can do the daubing of the edge. It's a very strange shape looking piece of card, but it's right, I promise. So what I do is, I don't know if you can see my fingers underneath the card, but I support the card with my fingers. If you didn't support the card, it would want to bend and flip, and you might get a crease, an ugly crease on your card, which just doesn't look very nice. Another way of doing it would be to laying it down and just catching the edges like that. You'll find you'll get a deeper inked edge if you do it this way. So it just depends on how much inking you like. I don't want a huge amount of inking, so I'm just going to ink it along the edge just to make it pop off the background just a little bit. Okay. Okay, that'll do. Now I'm going to get my card front with the thank you, and I'm going to stick it to the front of my card. And I'm just going to line up this right angle here. Because I'm using the glue stick, it means that I can move it about, but I'm going to just line it up like that and then squish it down. And then that simply is going to be stuck onto my card front. Just like so, even gap all the way around each edge. Give it a moment to take, and then you're going to stick the inside in your card, and then that's your card finished, ready to go.